would like to thank Wendy Walford for having me here and for now, and also the Latin American and Caribbean Studies for this opportunity. And everybody who is here today, thank you very much for coming. I heard from Wendy that a story can be a good way to present an idea. So today I will tell you a story that is part of my ongoing research for my PhD studies. This research is situated in the field of rural sociology. Before the story, I will start with a preamble so I can let you know the general theme, the focus, the methodology, and the main questions that lead my research. After the story, I will share with you the theoretical path that I am trying to develop as part of the preliminary findings. So the idea for today is to discuss with you the research path. It would be interesting also to compare it with other cases if anyone is interested. And I'm excited to hear from you, and all contributions are very, very welcome. So first of all, the preamble to the story. In the first decade of 2000s, the administration of the ethanol industry emerged on the international scenario as a major actor in the context of multiple crises, energy, food, climate, and financial. In this context, biofoods were promoted as a way of addressing energy and climate change crises, even as the rise in production deepened social and environmental contradictions, as has been analyzed by several authors such as Philip McMichael, Severino Borjas, Wendy Walford, Jennifer Clapp, among others. Also, other authors such as Marista Desvampa, Andrei Cordeiro, among others, indicate that the focus on green energy has deepened the asymmetries between the global north and south, reorganized land dispossession process, promoted the resurgence of conflicts over natural resources, and also that during this period, Brazil achieved the position of the second largest ethanol producer in the world. And this achievement was the result of massive state investment through tax incentives, new public policy coordination arrangements, a huge number of low interest loans via Brazilian Development Bank, a state-owned federal bank, and active pro-ethanol diplomacy. Today, Brazil and USA together produce more than 80% of world's ethanol. The US produces ethanol from corn and Brazil from sugarcane. While the state of São Paulo, leader in sugar energy production, was at a saturation point, investments were directed to other areas in Brazil, and in this specific context, and a specific region stands out, that is Mato Grosso do Sul. This region is the size of Germany, a little larger than New Mexico, and it has significant weight in the Brazilian agricultural agenda, and this is related to a historical pattern of land concentration, social exclusion, land expropriation, and violence against indigenous people and territories. Although the state has sugarcane, it became the fourth largest producer of sugarcane. There is the map, the progress, and a new frontier for sugar sector, it has deepened the pre-existing historical pattern that I told you of land concentration, land expropriation, and violence. So the territorialization of sugarcane expansion coincides with the areas where the Guarani Ibá and the Guarani Kaiowá ethnicities are located. You can see on the map the more brown, more sugarcane, and the colorful marks are indigenous lands. Indigenous peoples in Brazil had their right to their traditional territory described in the Brazilian Federal Constitution of 1988. So I need to tell you more about it, but I don't have much time, so I will be brief. This is a scenario of increasing conflict between landowners who are very organized in Mato Grosso do Sul and the indigenous populations, and of extremely violence against Guarani and Kaiowá people. But these indigenous people groups are also very well organized. So in summary, we have a so-called green solution with significant state investment, and for that I emphasize not only the efforts of Brazilian federal government, but also Mato Grosso do Sul government. And at the same time, we have a scenario of a historical but also increasing conflict between landowners and the Guarani Kaiowá people who are pressuring the government to recognize their traditional territory. So how do these two processes, relate to each other, and how do they play out in the specific territory? These are big questions, and they are the focus of my research. In order to study this process, I have been conducting research on a case study of Raiz em Carapó ethanol plant in Mato Grosso do Sul, focusing on the period between 2002 and 2016. And this is the story I'm about to tell you. But I'm conducting semi-structured interviews with key agents whose relationships to each other and to the land I have mapped. That includes Guarani Kaiowá leaders, Brazilian Development Bank agents, Raiz em Carapó agents, Mato Grosso do Sul government agents, local politicians, and researchers. And also, I'm analyzing documents, official documents from Mato Grosso do Sul government, documents from the local legislative, sugar energy and landowners representative entities, publications, Raiz and automated infos and reports. So the research is led by those questions. Who are the agents involved in expanding ethanol industry in Mato Grosso do Sul? What interest motivates this expansion? How are those operationalized? And what are the implications for the demarcation of indigenous lands? So far, we have gone over the preamble of the story, and so I don't have much time, so let's get to the start. So part one. The story starts in the indigenous traditional territory, Pirarucá. This territory is claimed by the Kaiowá ethnicity group in Kaiowá ethnic. In 2004, the state issued the first piece of formal recognition of Ayala from Pirarucá traditional territory. But 10 years later, in 2014, the document was void by the Brazilian Supreme Court. And the community appealed the decision, and the trial has been dragging on until nowadays. So they are still struggling for the demarcation of their land. While they fight for recognition, the Kaiowá from Pirarucá occupies only 0.5% of the official territory, with about 40 families. The rest, 27,000 acres, is occupied by 26 landowners. Oh, that's it. So here we have a letter that the community wrote, and that was published by Conselho Indigenista Missionário. So the plant started operating in early 2010. Sugarcane plantation started before. It seems that it was in 2005. It started there at Teixeira. That place was beautiful pasture, and before was mato. Today, everything is just canavial, plantation sugarcane. After the plant started to operate, health became bad for everyone, children, adults, and animals. Here we have Pimpado, Douradinho, Tuíba, Espada, and several other little fishes. It's all gone. Various kinds of medicine which we could find in the woods by the river, all gone. The plant is in the middle of two territories, Virarucá and Taquara, and this undermines the demarcation of the land. So I'd like to call your attention for 2 points to that define this letter. First, the community argues that Raizen presence undermines the official recognition of their traditional territory. This is very important because the connection between the plants, and the territorial recognition is very evident. So what I'm finding is that this link between land issue and ethanol expansion is erased, silenced, as ethanol became a global commodity. So both government and industry, in presenting ethanol as a green energy, it has become separate from the land. The second point I'd like to call your attention for is the community attributes the transformation process they described that happened to their territory to two characters. Okay? One of them is Zé Teixeira. Zé Teixeira is a latifundiário. It's a landowner, a large landowner, a cattle producer, and like most of his peers in the region, has no experience with sugarcane sector. 35% of the total area claimed by the community is under Zé Teixeira's ownership. And he leases his farm to produce sugarcane for Raizen. He is also a local politician who represents the interests of landowners and large rural producers and producers. And it's also one of the main anti-indigenous voices out. As a local politician, he has supported the sugar energy industry local law. Let me quote 2 sentences of his from a section of the State Assembly. So the right of use is talking about this. Does not overlay the right of the producer and property. And the second, I have a rural property in Arapó, that's the city of the territory we're talking about. If a sugar and ethanol processing plant comes to the region, I will leave my entire farm. So we can relate this rhetoric to a certain kind of moral economy that is hegemonic in the region and that integrates, links notions such private land productivity, latifundio, rentier, and a particular ethno-racial hierarchy. But I will get back to that later. The other actor that we find in the community letter is the mill itself, today called Raizen Caracol. For now, just bear in mind that the multinational corporations Shell and Cosan shares the majority of the control of the company. So I'm seeing this as a scenario of policy interests. Now the second part of the story. So in 2005, Nova America Group, owned by the Vicente Barbosa family from São Paulo and one of the largest mill owners in the country, inaugurated Nova America Agrícola Caracol. This unit started to plant sugarcane and in leased areas close to the plant site located between Viraruca and Taquara, now Raizen site. One of these areas is the Santa Claudina farm owned by the Teixeira. Santa Claudina farm overlaps Guarani, Viraruca. At this point, the sugar energy expansion would have boosted not only land prices, but also land rental prices, consolidating an advantageous scenario for landowners. That same year, Kazan started its strategy of going public on the stock market, an opportunity for companies to raise funds and expand their business. So Kazan is owned by Ometo family, also from São Paulo, and among the largest in the sector with Rezende Barbosa family, owner of Nova America. All of this activity is funded by loans provided by the Brazilian Development Bank, and so there is a cycle, okay, that IPO, that expansion, merger, that expansion, joint venture, that expansion, until we had in 2011 the last step of the cycle with Kazan and Shell joint venture, Raizen Energia. At this point, the plant was renamed to Raizen Caracol, and Nova America Group remains a sugarcane supplier. So we can see in this cycle concentration, internationalization, financialization process, which is a mark of the sugar energy sector dynamics in the first decade of 2000s. This process is also marked by the appreciation of land prices and by deepening of land control by foreign companies, by acquisition, lease, or production control. So the rentier logic stands out. So I have told you the story in a very quick way. So now I want to discuss with you theories and paths. I believe you can help me. So the work of David Harvey and the contribution to the notion of accumulation by expropriation that emphasize the permanent and internal role of the predatory practices of accumulation in capital is central. But for the personalization of scales that the case studies requires, I'm finding my arguments and the notion of regimes of retrocession very helpful, because they allow us to observe process of land expropriation as essentially political forms. They also allow us to recognize that in the process of accumulation by expropriation, the state, politics, and the ideology are internal and constitutive aspects of capital accumulation. Thus, these frameworks give the extra-economic dimension of coercion an intrinsic and continuous character. So, regarding this and considering that the dynamic observed in the case study are notably based on the reification of social and ethno-racial classifications, I'm also finding it useful to articulate the notion of coloniality of power as constitutive of dynamics of accumulation by expropriation, producing a sort of neo-extractivism. So these perspectives that I show you contribute to the understanding of the colonial form of the. Okay. Thank you. So, and regarding this, there is also a long tradition in Brazilian sociology that is dedicated to a critical understanding of Brazilian capitalist development and bourgeoisie characterization. In Florestan Fernandes' theory, for example, the development of capitalism in Brazil in each different phase revitalizes the structures inherited from the colonial era as a condition for capital accumulation, external exploitation, and maintenance of privilege. The modern is revealed not as the overcoming of the past, but in articulation with archaic structure. And archaic as a synonymous of latifúndio, land frontier, violence, and dependency. There are other very important authors that was inspired by this theory, but I just want to quote Regina Bruno that to make a link to other possibilities that I'm trying to experience with. So, okay, here you can see. Differently from other historical situations, there was not, or even is in Brazil, a contradiction between land rentier and capital. What predominated and still predominates is the union of the organizing and transforming force of capital with the conservative and rentier force of property. So this is what I'm finding in the empirical material I'm working on. And so another important key point that emerges from the case study is the dynamic of quality interests as a mechanism that sustain the archaic structures that we are talking about. So I'm finding Leandro Vergara Camus and Christopher Kay notion of quality bourgeois borrowed from Marx, very useful. It refers to a situation where the ties that unite different factions of the bourgeoisie with landowners reach levels that make it impossible to distinguish one from the other. So as I go deeper into the case study, these kinds of ties are becoming more evident. And finally, that in a certain kind of moral economy that mobilizes, sustains, and shapes the so-called green solution expansion in the region. The notion of moral economy is taken and inspired by Wendy Wolfer work in which she describes the moral economy of the agrarian elite in Northeast Brazil. So that is also a key to Regina Bruno's works, and she calls the doxa of the dominant classes in Brazil. That is, the defense of land ownership conceived as a natural, absolute right based on the notion that land is a commodity like any other, plus the direct association between latifúndio and productivity, plus the association between latifúndio, productivity, and classification schemes based on ethnic racial hierarchies. So I understand this doxa not as something immutable, but rather something defended every day through a series of symbolic, material, and cultural relationships with each other, with land, the state, and with the indigenous peoples. So as I continue my research, I will focus on this doxa and on the ties that configurates policy. So thank you for your time. I hope you have enjoyed the story, and I will really appreciate your contributions.